Hi, welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Wednesday, February 11th, 2026. Top 5 takeaways from the House Immigration Oversight hearing. Left to right, Rodney Scott, Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Joseph Eldo, Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and Todd Lyons, Acting Director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, testified during a House Committee on Homeland Security hearing on February 10, 2026. Immigration agency leaders appeared before Congress for the first time since 2 U.S. citizens were shot and killed by federal immigration officers in Minneapolis. Democrats and some Republicans on the House Homeland Security Committee on Tuesday took the opportunity to criticize the tactics used by officers on the ground and the strategy of top Trump administration officials to curb illegal migration. The criticism came as congressional funding is set to expire on Friday for the Homeland Security Department. The department that houses Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Customs and Border Protection, and Citizenship and Immigration Services. The hearing underscored how deeply divided Republicans and Democrats remain on top-level changes to immigration enforcement in the wake of the shootings. It suggested Congress is inching closer to another stopgap bill to fund the department in the absence of deeper agreement. Here are some takeaways from the hearing. 1. Deaths of 2 citizens stay top of mind. Both Republicans and Democrats discussed the deaths of Renee Macklin Good and Alex Preddy. The 37-year-olds killed by DHS officers in 2 separate incidents. Representative Andrew Garbarino from New York, the Republican chairman of the committee, called the deaths as well as increased violent rhetoric generally unacceptable and preventable. The safety of law enforcement and the communities that serve and protect must always come first. When officials or elected leaders rush to conclusions about law enforcement or their fellow Americans, public trust suffers. Garbarino said in his opening remarks, calling for a complete investigation. I cannot put myself in the shoes of law enforcement, nor can I imagine what the families of Miss Good and Mr. Preddy are enduring today, he said. But ICE Acting Director Todd Lyons, who hasn't been confirmed by the Senate yet, deflected questions regarding the deaths. He said he would not comment on any ongoing investigations. He also sought to deflect criticism of President Trump and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem for labeling Preddy as a domestic terrorist, saying as elected or appointed officials, that's the right to their comments. But Lyons, in response to Democrats' questions, did empathize that U.S. citizens shouldn't be caught up in immigration enforcement. ICE officers and special agents are trained in the Immigration and Nationality Act. So anyone that is here legally or lawfully or a U.S. citizen should not be concerned about being deported or detained. Lyons said he later drew a distinction between someone being arrested, which he acknowledged could happen to a U.S. citizen, and being detained on a longer basis. NPR witnessed multiple instances in Minnesota where immigration agents drove around Minneapolis and questioned people about their immigration status, with the state's attorney general saying U.S. citizens were detained. The detention of U.S. citizens has also happened under prior administrations. A 2021 Government Accountability Office report found that over a 5-year period, U.S. citizens had encounters with immigration officers that could lead to their arrest and even deportation. 2. Bipartisan questions about training and internal oversight. ICE and CBP officials broke down training and resources available to officers. In response to repeated questions about how officers are treating U.S. citizens and others, Lyons said that officers undergo 3 months of training, which includes 47 days at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy in Georgia. Law enforcement officers and special agents who were certified in the past got to have a shorter training module focused on topics just like the Immigration and Nationality Act. They would have to go through the rigorous immigration training, which unfortunately, immigration law is just as confusing and long as the tax code, Lyons said. Representative Eric Swalwell, Democrat from California, asked Lyons how many ICE officers have been fired for their conduct. Lyons declined to comment on personal matters. But Lyons did denounce some of the language immigration officers were caught using on video. For example, in a video shared on social media after Preddy's death, an officer can be heard telling a woman, "If you raise your voice, I will erase your voice." When asked about the footage, Lyons said he hadn't seen it, but said ICE does respect and adhere to the First Amendment, and that the statement heard in the video doesn't represent the values of the men and women of ICE. 3. Republicans share some concerns with Democrats. Republicans voiced concern about the 2 issues that Democrats have frequently raised: roving patrols and the use of body cameras. Under the second Trump administration, CBP, which houses the Border Patrol Agency, has taken a leading role in enforcing federal immigration laws in the interior of the country, rather than strictly near the borders. In response to widespread criticism of the events in Minneapolis, Trump removed Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino from serving as the public face of the immigration presence there, replacing him with White House Border czar Tom Homan. Trump later said in an interview that maybe we can use a little bit of a softer touch when it comes to immigration enforcement. Cobb Rep. Michael McCall, Texas, said he believed roving patrol should be done at the border rather than in the major cities of the United States. He also applauded the leadership changes in Minneapolis as returning to the original mission of ICE. Lawmakers from both parties have also pushed for greater use of body cameras to aid in oversight of agents' actions on the ground. Lyon said that ICE had 3,000 cameras for 13,000 officers, and Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Rodney Scott noted that only half of the 20,000 CBP officers have body cameras. Lyons pledged to Representative Tony Gonzalez, Republican from Texas, that body camera footage of enforcement in Minneapolis would be released to the public and that he welcomes all officers getting such cameras. Scott from Customs and Border Protection also pleaded for Congress to fully fund the body camera program for his agency too, noting that while there has been money for the physical devices, there have not been the personnel to fully implement the body camera program. So fund the entire program so that we can be transparent and that we can make sure America knows what we're doing, because that trust is critically important, Scott urged lawmakers. Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, has said that the department is sending body cameras to every field officer in Minneapolis, and that the body camera program will be expanded nationwide as funding allows. Democrats want this to codify into law. 4. Most requests were still partisan. The rhetoric and questions still seemed largely split along partisan lines. Republicans described the work done by ICE as remarkable. While Democrats called for the abolishment and dismantling of the agency. Other Democratic proposals continue to face an uphill battle for GOP support, including calls for officers to display identifying information such as their last names on their uniforms and to prohibit them from wearing face coverings. Representative Dan Goldman, Democrat from New York, asked Lyons whether he would admit to unmasking his officers. Lyons said no, and Republicans argued that banning face masks would make it easier for people to dox federal agents, a common refrain from the administration. ICE was in the spotlight while CBP, USCIS, and the looming shutdown took a back seat. Both Republicans and Democrats peppered Lyons with questions about his agency's operations, but lawmakers generally did not drill down into the changes at CBP and USCIS, despite those agencies' growing roles in immigration enforcement over the last year. Questions for CBP Scott still centered around border enforcement. That comes even as the Border Patrol has gone beyond its traditional jurisdiction of 100 miles from U.S. borders to conduct enforcement in cities like Minneapolis and lead operations in Illinois, North Carolina, and Louisiana. All three agencies hedged in response to questions about whether their operations would be affected in DHS shuts down on Friday. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Director Joseph Eldo reminded lawmakers that his agency is funded primarily by the fees people pay when they submit various forms and applications, so his employees would still get paid. And ICE and CBP both got a huge infusion of cash from Congress and Republicans' One Big Beautiful Bill Act last summer, making ICE the highest funded U.S. law enforcement agency. Lyon said the shutdown could affect the Department of Homeland Security's work related to transnational crime, but he did not know any impact to immigration operations. And Scott also didn't detail how the shutdown would affect personnel, just saying, "I agree America becomes less safe." The responses suggest any lapse in funding could most affect non-immigration agencies inside the Department of Homeland Security, like the Transportation Security Administration and Federal Emergency Management Agency, potentially spelling trouble for U.S. air travel and disaster response. What is a wind chill, and why is it dangerous? A person walks across a street during a winter storm in Philadelphia on January 25th. High winds and frigid weather can lead to dangerous wind chill conditions. Millions of people in the central and eastern United States are experiencing frigid weather with wind chills, temperatures that are in the single digits in many places. And the storm is expected to bring strong winds to much of the East Coast over the weekend. Wind chill is a measure of how quickly bodies lose heat when you combine low temperature with high winds. And wind chill conditions can be dangerous. The stronger the winds and the colder it is, the more likely you are to develop frostbite in a short amount of time or hypothermia, says Jessica Lee of the National Weather Service's Weather Prediction Center. Here's how wind chill works and how to protect yourself and those around you. What is wind chill? Wind chill is basically how cold the air feels. For example, if the thermometer shows an air temperature of 25 degrees and the wind is blowing at 30 miles per hour, it will feel like 8 degrees outside. That's because wind removes heat from your skin. As the air blows over you, the faster the wind is blowing, the faster it removes heat from your body. Thinking of your body as being a little heater. And you have a thin layer of warm air right against your skin. Lee explains, when it's windy, the wind is whisking away the insulating layer of warm air and replacing it with colder air, which then makes your body cool down faster. The National Weather Service publishes a chart that shows how much wind chill to expect from the air temperature is between 40 degrees and minus 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And the wind speeds are between 5 and 60 miles per hour. How do I know if wind chill conditions are dangerous. The chart above includes thresholds for frostbite, which is when the skin freezes. For example, if the air temperature is 5 degrees Fahrenheit, but there are 50-mile-per-hour winds, the wind chill will be negative 24 degrees. In those conditions, exposed skin will be frostbitten within 30 minutes. And when the air temperature is lower, it takes less wind to push conditions into extreme territory. For example, if the air temperature is minus 5 degrees Fahrenheit, it takes 35-mile-per-hour winds to freeze exposed skin in just 10 minutes. Frostbite can cause permanent damage, and the stages leading up to full-blown frostbite can cause temporary damage to tissues. As well as significant pain and discomfort, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. If the air temperature isn't below freezing, you can't get frostbite, but you could be at risk for hyperthermia, which is when the body gets dangerously cold. Hypothermia can be deadly. Who is at most at risk from the wind chill? Wind chill impacts are calculated for adults. Children who have less body mass and then get cold more easily are more at risk for hyperthermia in very cold conditions. Elderly people and people with underlying medical conditions may also be at greater risk, as well as people who work or play outside for long periods. Pets and other animals that venture outside in the cold, such as dogs, horses, and livestock, also experience wind chill. Although fur and hair help retain heat better than naked skin, wind chill also affects objects, although not to the same degree as it affects people and animals. Wind chill cools off objects more quickly if they are warmer than the air temperature. For example, if you turn off your car, the engine will cool more quickly if there are stiff winds. However, wind chill does not cause inanimate objects to get colder than the air around them. How can I protect myself from wind chill? The important things are you want to dress warmly, and you want to minimize your time outdoors. Lee says, those who do not have a reliable shelter should seek a safe indoor space when it is windy and cold. Wearing warm layers can help keep the body's core temperature in a safe zone, even when the wind is removing heat from the skin. Wearing windproof coats, pants, and shoes, and head coverings can help prevent hyperthermia in wind chill conditions. And to prevent frostbite, cover all your exposed skin. This includes your ears, your nose, your fingers, your toes, and even your cheeks and your chin. Lee says, grab a scarf, grab a hat. New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani recently faced similar questions and concerns about transparency and preserving government records after his administration began to delete posts made by his predecessor, Eric Adams, under the NYC mayor handle on X. However, Adams' post can be found in a public archive maintained by the city. As the State Department archives old posts, other agencies post extreme content. In isolation, the removal of State Department social media content is a minor change, unrelated to larger overhauls of American diplomacy and foreign policy, and the administration's widespread changes to the federal bureaucracy. But Trump's second term messaging strategy has been defined by a mindset that social media content is governing, and that governing is also achieved through content creation. The Department of Homeland Security, the Labor Department, and other federal government accounts have shared posts that contain white supremacist rhetoric and nods to conspiracy theories like QAnon. And Trump administration staffers frequently use X to spar with critics and post memes that support the president. On Friday, Trump faced uncharacteristic pushback, sharing a video on his social media after that contained false claims of election fraud and a short snippet of an unrelated video that contained a racist depiction of a former President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama as apes. The post was deleted after the White House initially defended it as an internet meme.